Hi everybody, Dave Isaacs here once again for TrueFire.com with another installment in the Riffin series. And I want to go really way back to basics with this one. You see I have my acoustic guitar out here. And I want to talk about creating riffs on acoustic in the open position using the simple open chords that you probably learned a long time ago, or if you just started playing, that are probably the core of your musical vocabulary right now. And I want to point out, even to those of you who are advanced players, that you don't ever want to underestimate the value of simplicity. And coming back to something as fundamental as a simple C chord, and really looking at the possibilities that are inherent, that are built into that chord, especially when you are musically more educated, when you're musically more sophisticated, when your vocabulary is bigger, when you have more that you can do. Think of all the different options that you have when you apply that knowledge to that simple fundamental idea of the C chord. So let's back up a little bit. In previous blogs, I've talked about the idea of using scale patterns as part of forming riffs. And of course, to some of you, a riff maybe has to be something that... And that's certainly a riff, and that's cool, and I will never get tired of playing stuff like that. But let's broaden that definition of riff just a little bit and say that a riff is a signature guitar part. A riff is something that you play that makes your listener recognize that song right from the beginning. So it's as much a part of the song as the melody, as the lyric, as the hook, as whatever it is that makes that song recognizable. So if I do this, now I just improvised that, but if that's something that you heard several times, you would start to remember it and you'd be able to distinguish it from, say, a similar pattern using the same chords, but putting the notes together differently. So what's different between those two? Really, I'm just thinking melodically. And consider that open chords are very, very useful no matter how sophisticated a player you are, because built into the open chord is a set of arpeggios, triads, of course, and also the scale forms that the chords are derived from. If I take this C chord, I can play an entire C major scale very easily just by lifting and adding fingers. Now when we start combining those things, now, I would consider that a signature part. That's something that if you heard a couple of times over, you would then recognize that that was the beginning of whatever song you heard it as the beginning of, right? So analyzing this a little bit, we have a scalar piece, which also, by the way, incorporates a triadic arpeggio in the key of C, 5, 3, 1, and then the melodic motion is C moving to D, and the D happens to be part of the G chord, so it's interconnected. You can't really separate these things because this sound is a piece of the C chord, it's a piece of the C scale, and it's also a C triad all at once, and it's also melodic. And then by going to the D, that's a note that's very easily harmonized by the G chord because it's part of the G chord. I don't have to go to the G chord. That's also a cool sound. That's once again exploiting the melodic elements here and using this D as, depending on how you look at it, a second or a ninth. There's distinctions there that we can make. Let's call it a 2 for simplicity's sake, because if C is 1, then D would logically be 2. Although if you know this chord, you're likely to call it a C add 9. That's a whole other theoretical discussion we could have that really isn't so essential to what I'm talking about today. But what I do want to bring your attention to is the combination of the arpeggiation of the chord, providing a foundation, with this melodicized triad working with the harmonic change. That right there is a sus4 resolving to the 3 to the root of the G chord, but again, it is a melody. Da dee da dum. So far, dee da da dum, da 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 dum. And once again, just as I moved C into D to bring us the harmonic change from the C chord to the G chord, so that we had this going to that, I did something similar with G moving to A, setting up an F chord, A being part of the F chord. And so we're taking knowledge of the chord form itself, we're taking knowledge of the arpeggio, we're taking knowledge of the scale. And let's also look at this fact. This arpeggio here, which, by the way, once again is outlining a triad, 1, 3, and 5. If we take that as one piece, and we take this as another piece, you can start to think of the guitar the way a piano player thinks with their two hands, because we're essentially separating into two parts, a lead part and an accompaniment part, played together. It doesn't take much, really. And if you're a strummer, if your vocabulary is primarily just holding open chord forms and moving this hand, this idea of separating the guitar into lower region, middle region, upper region opens up so many possibilities for you. It's a given on a piano because when you sit at a keyboard, one hand is in the treble register, the higher notes. That's not to say you can't play low notes with this hand, but just the natural thing to do when you sit down is to put your hands there, and one hand is covering more low notes and one hand is covering more high notes. And of course there's all different things that you can do, but that's the first thing that happens. That's just sitting down at the keyboard. Here's where your hands are likely to be to start with, and that's immediately what becomes accessible to you, and then everything else is just variations on that idea, right? Different ways that you can approach it. So you can approach the guitar that way by just thinking of bass strings, treble strings, and your middle register here. If you combine that concept of essentially orchestrating bass, middle, treble with the idea that a chord like a C chord is not a fixed box that never changes, but just a set of notes in a particular pattern of fingerings that can be manipulated by adding and removing fingers, then you have this extremely powerful musical combination, because I used the word orchestrate before. You are orchestrating. You are saying, here's the low part, here's the high part, here's the melody, here's the accompaniment. It becomes very clear to the listener. It again makes things easy to understand and easy to remember, and that really is the fundamental requirement of a good riff, is that it's just easy to remember, that it sticks in the listener's ear, right? That's always what we're going for. So I hope this all makes sense. I hope that it's helpful to you. I think it ought to be. It's certainly helpful to me. Knowing those building blocks, having those pieces in place, having different ideas, gives you the opportunity to say, well, I'm not finding anything interesting just by noodling around here, but what if I try putting in a set of parallel thirds? Or what if I try just lifting a finger off this chord? Or what if I try adding a finger to this chord? All of these are simple ideas that can open up all kinds of doors to you, and that's what this is really all about. I'm Dave Isaacs. Thanks for watching.